Hello, Team Basecamp, and welcome to this review of break and finish sweet spot intervals. This is going to be an advanced review, but I want to talk about the concept of understanding comparison and history and to better understand our progress and how we're doing on things. And I'm going to show you two ways you can do that. So one, let's start out with a simple Training Peaks review. Pete stayed up here. Pete did a great job in this workout and did the bonus interval for those on the extended workouts. I'm going to click in, go to analyze, and just keep this simple. You can see real quick, I could align the workout. He nailed it, did a very good job. He looked strong, really well done. I'm going to look at these intervals. I'm just going to drag over these as interval and just take a quick look. But what I'm going to do, because I forget in my videos, is I'm going to write down what I see. So his average watts was 236 over here at a heart rate of about 148. Then if I look at the second one, his average watts were I missed a little there. Come on, me on camera. Was 230. Round that out. And then his third one, which he did on his own, you can see, looks a little different. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Was 226. So he did three intervals, 236, 230, 226. That's awesome. Now, we've done this workout recently. I can tell you when you're working with professional athletes, it really is important. You don't have this wide range of a bunch of intervals. You're doing generally the same kind of intervals. You don't have a bunch of different workouts. You're kind of going at the same thing, but that allows you to compare over time. So we did this workout 2 weeks ago or was it 3 weeks ago? It was a Thursday. I know that. There it is. Thursday, the 20th. So February 20th. So you should take a look at yours. Click in and we'll just look at Pete's here. When I look at his intervals, he did two this day. So now he did a whole extra interval today than he did 2 weeks ago. And if I look at this, just drag over, I can never get the right spot. It really is right there. Yeah, that's short. It was 15 minutes and he was 223. So 223 on the first one for only 15 minutes. The ones today were 16. And the second one was 226. So 223 and 226, you can see it was a little stronger on the second one last time. Just making sure I had that right. Yep, 225, 226, that type of number. A minute shorter. So basically he did 225 for both of those. Well, if you go back to today, and you probably, because I said the numbers out loud, know where I'm going, he was about 8 to 10 watts stronger on the first two. His heart rate was actually a little lower too. I forgot to say that. And even on his third one of the day with an extra minute in each, he was 227. He was 1 watt stronger than his best one last Thursday. That is a good, healthy way to compare. There is no greater indicator of the trend of your performance, your fitness, your capacity, your capability than history itself. And this is one of the reasons for me when I'm coaching athletes individually, I don't do a lot of diversity in intervals. I generally tend to stick to the same types because it really allows us to compare interval execution and actual gains or declines. And then that triggers like why. So why did Pete do better? Was he fresher? Was he fitter? Was he stronger? That's an analysis that, Pete, you should be asking yourself and along with your coach. Why did he do better this time? Again, an analysis, but we do know the facts. He did better. He's stronger in this workout. He did a whole nother interval, 3 intervals versus 2 last time, and was stronger actually on all 3. So that's a pretty good comparative place to start. If you were to look at that overall and just know like it's not a perfect quantification, but it is knowledge. Now let's take a look at comparing two athletes, something I normally don't like to do, but I think this will be insightful for one of the powerful reasons. And this is where you have to be, the response to exercise stimuli is complex because human beings are complex. And when we think about that complexity, it really is in how our energy system functions, and I would call it some muscular skeletal response to exercise stimuli. But let's talk about energy systems here. You can see the same three intervals from Pete, exactly what we just looked at. You can see this one looks a little busier. One of the ways, like I just happen to notice this with Pete, like I'm always looking for, I preach this concept of control. I want the athlete to be in control of the interval until they're not, right? Until the very, very end, when it's just like, holy crap, I'm doing anything I can to survive. So if I look at this first interval, and I could just take a quick poll here too, that looks controlled. I can see in this screen, you see I'm doing this by like single channels. So I'm looking at power here and cadence here. Look how smooth his power and cadence is. That's the first interval. He's very fresh, right? So yes, the numbers are what they were, 235. I grabbed a little extra. You can see it there. But now I look at the second one, and I'm looking at that. It's probably a little dark here for your screen. But look here, his cadence becomes a little different. He drops it down. He picks it back up. He doesn't shift because there's a transition in there for a little more power. So it doesn't really shift. He's got his cadence average up around 88, which is good, but it doesn't quite look as smooth there. But his power looks pretty controlled. And he drops off about 4 watts in this one, but really his end sprint wasn't as high. But then the workout ends and he does this last one on his own. And there's a little bit there I didn't pick up. I'm trying not to zoom in here so that you can see. When I look at this last one real quick, I picked up some extra time. He was really more like 226 on this one. I've got some extra time. But look how ragged. Here's where he's starting to fight the interval. And this is always an excellent indicator of when you begin to fatigue. You're not fatigued. You're not past your time to exhaustion point. You're not falling off the power. You're getting close though, right? You're fighting it now because this is 48 minutes of sweet spot he did. And in that, he's fighting it. And you can see he's just trying to find the right gear to make that power a little more comfortable. And if you look close here, and I'm just going to unclick, you can see it's not as smooth as the first one. He's fighting it a little more, finding power, kind of up and down a little bit. And that doesn't make it a bad interval at all. As a matter of fact, he nailed the power. He was a couple watts down, but that's okay. He was still well on target, but you can see he was fighting it. So probably this was the right dosage for Pete. If you were to try to do a fourth interval, this would probably be, to use the fancy physiological term, ugly, right? We'd see hunting, standing, all those things we tend to do to trick our brain to make the desired power. We don't want to see that in sweet spot. We're doing the hard 40-20s or hard VO2 max. Those can be a little ugly, right? That's just downright fighting it out. In these sweet spot, control is really important. You should be able to deliver sweet spot in control. So there's a very interesting impact. Okay, now that I know he's got the right dose, he was on the ragged edge, and you could look at that in training peaks. Look at your own if you had to do 2 or 3. Was the second one was your cadence, and this is why we use incline mode all the time now. It's so much better. I don't know why I didn't do it 2 years ago, is we can really see those impacts. Now, I want to go to training impact. So Pete's got a pretty high Pmax and a solid FRC. So for Pete today, doing 3 of these, he had a 10 anaerobic impact and a 5 aerobic. He dug a little harder on these first 2. He was really pushing it. You can see his DFRC, that anaerobic battery, kind of going up, the harder start. And this is exactly what it's meant to do. By the way, it being a race sim, it's also a very good way to execute a sweet spot. Then he kind of recovers in that easy cruise zone. Then we start burning it right back down again, right? So you see that he's definitely, for him, he's burning anaerobic. Why? Well, let's say everybody listening to this has a threshold of 200 watts. Or better yet, let's say everyone listening to this can execute at max effort for a 20-minute power test, can do 200 watts. We don't make that 200 watts the same. Some people might be making 190 of those watts aerobically, and the other 10 anaerobically. Some people might be making 195 of those watts aerobically and 5 watts anaerobically. Some people might be making 185 watts aerobically and 15 watts anaerobically. When we do sweet spot and we're in that transition, right, we're going pretty close to that 20-minute maximum. One of the things we're developing is, and I'm going to use an overarching term of metabolic versatility, and this isn't exactly precise, but it works. Versatility is the key word. Depending on your energy system, how you make energy, which is really dependent on your muscle fiber makeup, these kind of sweet spot, dynamic sweet spot efforts can have different impact for different riders. But yet that's a good thing because it's using your unique physiology in this area to make sure you can produce threshold level power in the right mix of anaerobic and aerobic energy. So let's look at the impact. He was 10 and 5. Remember these numbers, and you can see why. If I look at the time he was anaerobic, he's getting some good anaerobic contribution in this effort of doing 90%. Sweet spot was 90 to I think the target was 90% today. So he's a little more anaerobic, and you can see some of the mixed frame. He's heavy mixed and not, a little bit aerobic. You see some of the cruise zone here, but just, some aerobic. So he's getting a higher anaerobic. Now, remember that thinking. So I'm going to go to, I'm going to find John Keepers. Of course, I'm struggling now there he is. I'm going to dig into the workout. I'm going to go to his break and finish. You can see he did 3, right? So if I did the ride summary, you can see he did 3. I could look at his channels. Same kind of vision, right? You see him being a little more ragged on that third one, both in power and cadence. And he's just getting a little tired there. That you should, by the way, everybody should on the third one. So, but still a pretty solid execution. He did this workout as well as Pete did. But now when we look at impact, John was a 7 and a 7. John has a little more Pmax and a lot more FRC in the engine. So he's got more fast twitch. He's got a higher threshold here. But remember, we're targeting this as a percentage of threshold. He's got more kind of fast twitch muscle. So when he's doing the surges, it doesn't cost him. His FRC is bigger, so he doesn't have the anaerobic demand of the more aerobic Pete. It's like, I hate referring to everybody kind of third person like this. So even though he's doing the power output, because his aerobic capacity is stronger and he's got a bigger battery, it's not drain. He's got a bigger anaerobic battery. The drain isn't as deep as the change ups, the little sprint, the 45-second breakaway and the finishing sprints. It's not as challenging to John, who has more anaerobic capacity. Therefore, he's not hitting that system as hard. He's not punching as hard at his anaerobic system. He's more of a 7 and a 7 impact, aerobic and anaerobic. And this is interesting, right? So the question you might ask me is, well, when we apply then sweet spot, particularly dynamic sweet spot, which could be surges or race sim or whatever, is that the same workout for both the more aerobic Pete and the more anaerobic John? 85% yes. 87.6% yes, because what you are working on in those zones is a form of metabolic versatility. You need to be able to cross over from, making energy aerobically and anaerobically, burning fats and burning carbs, oversimplification, and intermixing those fuel systems to make good, efficient power, and then to deal with the byproducts of that power output. So that itself is an individual thing. So when Pete executes these workouts and he's draining his battery more because it's not quite as large, because he's a more aerobic rider, he is forcing more response that way. He is forcing an improvement in his anaerobic energy and the byproduct management of that, where when John does it, who is more of he's got that much, that he's got a really big anaerobic battery. he's not draining it as hard. So then should he go harder on the little dynamic surges? No, because what this is training your body is to improve the way you make energy in sub-threshold extended efforts, which racing has a lot of. It's kind of hard to explain. I didn't think about that before, but understand what's happening here by individualizing the training to your FTP is it is taking into account some of your unique physiology. And even though the workouts look on paper exactly the same and as a percentage of power are exactly the same, they have different impacts based on your unique physiology. And that's one of the ways, like, to maybe fine tune your training. There are some minor elements. I'd be lying if I said, I might not like if I was coaching both John and Pete, I would tweak their workouts a little bit to get a little more out of them. But that being said, it's still highly impactful to have done the work because you are generally matching it to your unique physiology. Hope that makes sense. You can feel free to ask questions. I have a feeling that's going to bring up some, and I will gladly answer them. All right, everybody. Thanks.